Before we start, I thought I would give an update on our Swami Brahma Rupanandi. Everyone is very concerned. Many of you know that he's been in the hospital for the past several days. He came back from India about 10 days ago and wasn't feeling very well, and then started having some pain, and he tested positive for COVID and ended up in the hospital with some lung problem and everything. He's doing better. But the main thing is that he's in a tremendously positive mood. I spent a lot of time with him yesterday, and I don't think he's ready to leave this world, but he said if this is the time, he's perfectly fine. It was very inspiring, actually, to be with him. He was saying that he's 100% convinced that the Holy Mother will come at the final moment, that Swami Swahananda, Swami Purvanandi, some others, that they said that this is Mother's promise, and he's convinced. He says, if this is my time to go, I'm very happy to go, that I no question in my mind, and if not, I'll be very happy to come back to the center. He loves the center. He was saying how grateful he is to all of the devotees here, and he knows that everyone is praying for him, and so it was really wonderful to see that state of mind. And this is proof. This is proof that if we lead a life of spiritual practice with sincerity and devotion, shraddha, that we'll see the fruits at the end. We sometimes think that, how is it possible to be free from desire? All of that. We may go through a whole lifetime thinking, this desire, that desire. When we get closer to the end, the mind changes. He was perfectly content, no desire to do anything, this or that. Otherwise, we all have our desires. Yeah, and we think, how is it possible not to have desire? But as we get closer to the end, then some change really takes place. So, the doctors think that he's doing okay, that he'll survive and everything. But anyhow, just wanted to give everybody an update, and especially to let everyone know how grateful he is to all of you, and all the care that he's been given and the love that he's been shown and everything. So that's a little bit of an update. We're hoping he'll be okay, and he'll probably go to a rehab center from here. And he hasn't had any solid food or anything for several days, but very cheerful and very good mood. So we're continuing this morning with our series on the Mundaka Upanishad. This is the third session, and we saw earlier that this is one of the Upanishads that was extensively dealt with by Swami Vivekananda. That Kathopanishad, Ishopanishad, under different titles, he's spoken all of these. But this Mundaka Upanishad, he actually gave a full translation, went through the whole thing. It's in the 9th volume of the complete works. And many of the verses that he refers to or quotes come from this Upanishad. The Upanishad doesn't have a very fascinating story, but it has some of the most beautiful verses in it. The Kathopanishad is that great story with Nachiketa and Yama and everything. This is a very, very simple thing, that there's a householder, a very pious householder named Shaunaka, and he goes to a great sage named Angiras, and he receives the highest wisdom from him. So there's not much of a story. But the verses are sublime. This is why this is really considered one of the finest of all of the Upanishads, just for the sheer beauty of it. So everything begins with a single question: Kasminnu bhagavo vigyate sarvam idam vigyatam bhavati iti. What is that one thing to be known, knowing which all this, everything is known? Now, I mentioned in the beginning, this is an indication of the brilliant mind of the householder to ask this type of question. He's not asking, is there one thing that explains everything? he has that presence of mind and that insight to know there must be one thing. But what is that one thing? So that assumption is there, that there's a key to understanding everything. If we understand that one thing, then it explains everything. And we'll get images as knowing the nature of gold, we understand everything made of gold, or clay, everything made of clay. Thakur liked to use the image of this artificial fruit, all made of wax. And sometimes he would say, I see everything chinmaya, everything made of consciousness itself, just as this artificial fruit is all made of wax, something like that. So this is that question that gives the assumption that there's an underlying unity, an underlying universal principle, a oneness that will allow us to explain all the varieties that we see, that distinction, variety, qualities, everything, they have to inhere in something. The changeful has to inhere in something that doesn't change. This is that idea. If we want to have a concept of something that can account for all the change in the universe, that one thing can't have any change. We remember Thakur's image of the vat of liquid, which will allow the cloth to be colored any color that we want. That can't have a color itself. That has to be colorless. The light itself, if it can account for all of the colors of the universe, in the spectrum, all of the colors of the rainbow, that light itself has to be invisible. So the ground of the changeful will always be something unchanging. And the question is, do we explain it in some type of unchanging matter? Do we explain it in terms of energy? Do we explain it in terms of consciousness? And we'll see that the Upanishad will bring everything back to that one unifying principle, which we call Brahman. Now we saw that the reply that's given is not what we really expect. We don't really get the answer in the very beginning. The reply is that first you have to understand that there are two different types of knowledge. This is para vidya and apara vidya. This is a distinction that is a very radical type of distinction because the lower knowledge includes everything, scientific knowledge, philosophical knowledge, even the Vedas. Anything that's within this realm of mind, anything which can be conceived of or thought or reflected on. Swamiji himself used to say, Vedas are the only scripture that say that you have to go beyond the Vedas, that we have to go transcend, because it's philosophy, even the Upanishads. We don't find truth, this will be one of the main themes today, we don't find truth in any doctrine or any ism, that the truth is something to be experienced. So all of these belong to the lower knowledge. Because it belongs to the relative world, it's all conceived of within the mind, and the higher knowledge is that by virtue of which we realize the imperishable absolute, the supreme Brahman. So the higher knowledge is not really a knowledge that involves that distinction between objective knowledge and the knower. It's really a type of experience. And we always wonder, what does it mean to know Brahman? Because this is, we have that very axiomatic idea that the knower can never be known, that Brahman can never be known as an object. So what does it mean to be a knower of Brahman? It means to realize we are that. So it belongs to a different realm. This is para vidya. So we'll find a distinction here between the absolute and the relative, very much like Sri Ramakrishna's distinction between the nitya and lila. This is a terminology that Thakur likes, a very poetic terminology, that looking upon the relative as a play, this divine play of the Divine Mother, and the nitya is that transcendent, unchanging realm. But Sri Ramakrishna emphasizes the idea that they belong to the same reality, and both are real. Only one has a relative type of reality. Both are real, but still, that doesn't mean we don't make a distinction. We can make a distinction between that which is nitya and anitya. that which is constantly changing, and that which is permanent beyond time and space, and ultimately which is the witness of everything. Now, the Mundaka Upanishad will make a further distinction along the similar lines between jnana and karma. Now, we like to think that these distinctions are not very important. We can be a jnani, we can be a karma yogi, that will have the same ultimate goal and realization. But very often in the Upanishads, and in Sri Ramakrishna's own language, when he talks about the karma, he means ritual. And here also it means ritual. This is a very strong distinction, especially for Shankaracharya, that even the Vedas are divided into these different sections. One has to do with karma and the other with jnana. Karma kanda, jnana kanda. And we do the first one first. That means all the yajnas and everything, the ritual, and there's some hidden desire or obvious desire behind it, to go to heaven, to have children, to have a good crop, all of that. And then we leave that behind. And this is the role of the Upanishads. So this distinction is there. What is the role of this, all of this ritualistic worship? It has a role to play, but it has to be done with some type of attitude, nishkam attitude. Now, this is also a bit of a tricky thing. How do we do a yajna for some selfish purpose without some selfish desire behind it? It can be for the sake of the family, the sake of society or something. But there's one school of thought that even this is a type of preparation for going higher. But the Upanishad, for some reason, spends a lot of time on these different types of ritualistic worship, different types of rites and rituals, and reaching the abode of the gods and all the different things like that. So we wonder why so much time is being spent on all of this, and it turns out that it's to make a distinction between how limited the fruits of that type of worship are compared to what we can get through a higher type of realization. So it has that value to it. It's kind of a negative type of value, but really meant to show how foolish it is to disregard this paravidya and remain with this aparavidya, and the energy that's wasted on the enjoyment of the world and this desire for the world to come. So this section ends with, we have a very famous verse, avidyayam antare vartamana swayam dhira pandita manyamana jaghanyamana paryanti mudha andhenaiva niyamana yatandha. Remaining in the throes of ignorance and thinking ourselves to be very wise, fools stumbled here and there like the blind led by the blind. So it's a curious way of taking us to this point where we say, okay, that there's some enjoyment in the world, we can do some type of ritual, some type of worship, we can even pray for some types of enjoyment, but at some point we'll realize that it's not really getting us anywhere, that we're kind of stumbling around, and we need some higher type of guidance, that like blind led by the blind. So then we get to really the main subject of the Upanishad is, how do we discover that ultimate reality which transcends everything, which doesn't change, which is permanent, which is our real nature, and which constitutes higher knowledge, this paravidya, the supreme Brahman. Now, last time I emphasized one particular point. We have a concept of Brahman that we find belongs to the philosophical schools. And it's pristine, it's very pure. There's pure consciousness, unchanging, transcendent. There's Nirguna Brahman. The Upanishads present us with a picture of Brahman that is more poetry than philosophy. I don't want to say that it contradicts any of the acharyas, what they say, but they don't care so much, the authors of the Upanishads. They don't care so much to present a very well laid out philosophical system. There may be verses that will be dualistic, there'll be some that will be non-dualistic, and everything in between. And Swamiji himself says, yes, the Upanishads speak in different voices at different times. Swamiji was a little bit critical of all of the acharyas, because each one will take a verse and try to show that it's dualistic, non-dualistic, qualified, non-dualistic, with a little torturing of the text. So we'll find that this Upanishad will speak in terms that the dualists will like more, and other terms the non-dualists will like more, but it doesn't care, because the Brahman is a living thing, not living with its cells and everything like that. But the concept of Brahman in the Upanishads is very beautiful, expansive, filled with awe. We understand how these ancient rishis, when they had that experience, how the beautiful poetry would flow from them. So this is that concept that we get of expansion and projection and like the spider weaving this whole universe out of its own person and dwelling within and then withdrawing it again. So we get all of the beautiful imagery, and all of this takes place naturally. We sometimes ask, why did God create such a universe? But we get these verses that just like the hair is growing out of the body, nobody made any plan. It's something that takes place naturally, or herbs growing out of the earth. So even for us, if you have a dream last night and I say, why did you have that dream? I didn't choose to have that dream. It emerged. It just kind of comes out. Now, there's something behind it, of course. For us, we have our whole psychological background. For the Upanishadic seers, it was the Veda. That whatever's in the Veda, that'll be that storehouse, that subconscious mind, the cosmic mind of the Ishvara, of the Creator. Some idea like that. Now, this doesn't mean that Brahman doesn't do something. And how is it that this Brahman can start this whole process of creation? Tapas. Tapas, some mental power. And it's very hard to understand all of this without some concept of cosmic mind, which brings in, again, this Saguna Brahman and everything. But we have this idea that through the deep meditation, deep concentration, heating everything up, that everything comes out of that. This is the way we have some type of, as I say, poetic explanation of how this whole universe can proceed out of that one absolute unchanging reality. That at the heart of that reality, there's something, some chit shakti. We can try to explain it by Maya, if we want. It's a little difficult. But there's something there, something, even this Maya, we end up explaining it in terms of Shakti. It's very hard to get around that. Now, what happens when we have that realization, when we understand the real nature of reality? If it's something external, it won't have much effect on us. If it's our very own self, then everything gets changed. If we know that I am that, I also have beyond time, space, causation, I also was never born, I'll never die, one with that transcendent Brahman, then all of the doubts disappear, all of our karma gets burnt. We'll have a beautiful verse about that. Some real transformation takes place. It's not an intellectual thing. It's not just that, oh, now I know the secret of this, I can write an article about it. It's not like that at all. It's this, Swamiji says, being and becoming, that this ultimate change takes place. So this is basically what we've come to at this point. Now, we reach the stage where the Upanishad will ask another very important question. If this Brahman is transcendent, formless, and unknowable, If it's the source of the universe, transcendent, beyond time and space, all of that, and even within us, it seems to be hidden within us. And how do we know it? And what does it mean to know Brahman? So this Upanishad again becomes very practical. How do we know that which is unknowable? There are ways that we can put this mind in a certain framework so that that realization can take place. So we'll get some very practical teachings here. We know that it's not going to be known in that traditional knower knowledge, object of knowledge relationship. It's not that. And we know that if this Brahman is ultimately the subject can never be turned into an object. We may say sometimes, and Swamiji himself will say, oh, you're seeing nothing but Brahman itself now. Or Sri Ramakrishna would say that. But it's not exactly the same as saying that we're turning Brahman into an object. It's not like that. This is from this when the mystical mind goes into a very high state and sees everything as a manifestation of the divine. It's a different type of thing. So we have two basic ways. Mundaka Upanishad will talk of two basic ways in which we can understand this transcendent absolute Brahman as being also immanent within us. And one is through knowledge or discrimination, and the other is through meditation. So we'll find not the meditation that we're used to, not exactly the yogic meditation, not exactly the meditation that we do, a little bit of a devotional type of meditation, but still a type of meditation. So what's necessary for this type of meditation is an understanding of this concept of the microcosm and the macrocosm. That if we want to know that which is at the heart of the whole universe, if we understand that that same reality is at the heart of the individual, then we know that if we understand ourselves, we understand everything. This is something like what Sri Ramakrishna meant when he said that the way that we see that real sun is through the reflected sun. We would like to say that, yes, let me realize that Brahman transcendent, beyond everything, or the ground of the whole universe. But it's very difficult to do. But fortunately, that same sun of knowledge is reflected within our hearts as our own self, and by turning within, realizing the self, which is at the heart of the microcosm, we realize that, which is also at the heart of the macrocosm. So this is a very helpful distinction that we have, or concept that we have, that same structure will be there if we want to know what is the soul of the universe and what is the soul of the individual. This universe is like the body of God. We have the Purusha concept. Soul dwells within that. It'll be the same that is dwelling within the individual. We understand, we realize that self within us. We've understood what's that self of the whole universe. So this microcosm, macrocosm idea. So we see in the Upanishad this macrocosm vision. It says the heavens are its head and the sun and the moon his eyes. This is that idea of the Purusha. The Brahman thought of as a huge person somehow. The directions are his ears and the Vedas are his speech. The air is his prana. The universe is his heart. The world is his feet. He manifests in the universe as the soul of the universe, in the same way that he manifests in the individual as the soul residing within the body and mind. Microcosm, macrocosm is a very important idea in Vedanta. Because if we have to realize, see, very often we have this idea that we're seeing nothing but Brahman, as the same way that we're really seeing a rope, but we think it's a snake. Now, for us to try to understand how I'm looking at a chair, how I'm really seeing Brahman, it's almost impossible. Almost impossible. But if I turn within and say, when I look at myself and I see body, mind, senses, and everything, and somebody says, yeah, but you're really seeing with the self, you're seeing that consciousness, that conscious self. That I can understand. That we can do. It's much easier to understand the idea of superimposition with regard to the individual as opposed to with the external world. It's very hard. I myself don't understand exactly this idea that we're seeing nothing but consciousness. On some level, it contradicts that idea that the knower can never be known. Some type of chinmaya, some type of manifestation or projection, even that is very difficult. But I know myself as consciousness, and I can understand this false identification with external things. So this microcosm is really the key to understanding. Once we realize the real nature of the self, then we can understand all the manifestations. Thakur says once we get to the roof, then we can see all the different paths and all the different ways in which it manifests there. So we'll ultimately get to this idea, basically, that Brahman and Atman are one. I am Atma Brahma. This is the great Mahavakya that we have here. That what we're really saying is that Atman, which I take to be an individual self, is not an individual self at all. It's pure consciousness. That Brahman, which I take to be the source of the universe and everything, is also pure consciousness. And one of them, I give the term because I see it in the context of the universe, cosmic context. The other, I use a different term, Atman, because I see it in the individual context. Now, we get a very nice verse that says, just as sparks, which have the same nature as fire, fly off from the fire in thousands and thousands, so do all kinds of beings originate from the imperishable and merge back into that same imperishable. Now, what does this mean? If we want to look at it at face value, we have to say it's a dualistic interpretation, and that the individual souls have their real individuality, and they live for a certain period of time, and then they turn into embers and they come back. Now, Shankaracharya, he'll give a non-dualistic interpretation of this, which he's supposed to. He's defending that point of view. We can't criticize the acharyas for trying to show consistency in the scriptures. This is their job. So he gives a highly non-dualistic interpretation. Swami Vivekananda also likes that interpretation, although Swamiji, of course, the follower of Sri Ramakrishna, he'll say that they're all valid ways of looking at it. But this interpretation says that fire is infinite, so there can be no parts to the infinite. So this individuality is only apparent. And of course, we have that understanding, like the space inside the jar, that it appears to be separate from the rest of space only because of the jar. We break that jar, we realize space can't be separated. So this is how we take it. The non-dualists will understand it. But it's a beautiful illustration. We don't, I keep harping on this idea, we don't have to take this as a philosophical theory. We can take it as poetry. That we can understand that even a tiny little spark comes from that huge fire and has the same light and heat to a smaller degree, that's all. So that we all come out of this fire of Brahman. We have our existence for a short period of time. Each lifetime will go by like that, and we'll end up going back into the fire again. That's all. A very nice, beautiful way of looking at it. And the dualists will like this interpretation. It's fine for them. But they also shouldn't say that this is proof that this is the only way of looking at it. This is the beauty of Sri Ramakrishna, that truth was something way beyond all of these different doctrines and theories. And that all of these are capable of taking us to that highest point. If we like this dualistic point of view, fine, it's a point of view, that's all. That it'll take us there. So we don't have to really beat our heads against the wall, trying to show that this is really a non-dualistic idea and everything, that we can simply accept it this way. And I like it, it's beautiful. Now, we'll have other ideas, waves on the ocean, all sorts of things that will be closer to our non-dualism or Shishtadvaitavada, fine. They were poets, they were kavis, who wrote all of these things. Anyhow, we have this beautiful idea that each spark rises from the fire, exists for a few moments, it'll cool off, and that cool ember will float back into the fire itself. Now, if we start thinking about how do we get all these different jivas that come into the world, and this fire keeps throwing them out, if we want to, is there an infinite number, a finite number, we'll find everything leads to a contradiction. So this human mind doesn't have the ability to understand these things. This is another very, very important point that Sri Ramakrishna made over and over and over again, that it's like trying to pour 10 gallons of water into a 1 gallon bucket. We can't do it. Now, we find a second interesting point here at this point of the Upanishad, that as soon as Brahman, or the imperishable, Brahman word is not always used. Sometimes the Akshara, other words, is spoken of in terms of this immanence, this role, Saguna Brahman, this part of creation, that will get a verse expressing the transcendent, unchanging nature of Brahman. This is the ultimate paradox, how that which is unchanging can apparently change or be the source of all manifestation that we see. So we'll find the same Purusha who dwells within this whole universe. That same Purusha is without any form. It never takes birth. It has no prana. It has no mind. The same Brahman which is identified with prana. It has no prana. This is paradox. It's not contradiction. There's a very subtle distinction between contradiction and paradox. The contradiction is two things that can't take place at the same time. Paradox is something that we don't understand. It apparently contradicts it, but we find that it actually happens. So there's some explanation for it that we don't quite understand. Now, this is exactly what Sri Ramakrishna means when he says that the same reality is both with form, without form. It's the same reality is both transcendent and immanent, personal and impersonal, one and the same. We can say from two different points of view. We can say from the highest Paramarthika point of view, Vyavaharika point of view. Shankaracharya likes to make this type of distinction from the verses that seem to indicate Brahman undergoing change and Brahman being the source of the universe and creating and everything. This will be from the relative point of view. But if it takes place, it takes place. These are all our way of explaining how it takes place. We can make that type of explanation. The point is that this universe is very mysterious. Life is very mysterious. We don't know why and how anything happens. We fool ourselves into thinking that we can somehow understand all of these things. This is why Thakur was such a genius. So clearly he would say, how much can we understand of all of these things? And yet we keep trying to do these. Anyhow, so this chapter then will end with an assertion that everything that exists, this means also the gods and goddesses, men and animals, the whole of nature, comes from that one imperishable reality. Now, how it comes, we don't know. Is it some real change that takes place? Is it transformation? Is it projection? It doesn't go into the details, but somehow everything is traced back to that one imperishable reality. That same ultimate reality dwells within the cave of the heart. And if we realize Brahman dwelling within the cave of the heart, then the job is done. Our ignorance is gone, that our doubts are gone, transformation will take place. So this is the real theme of the Upanishad, is realization, how to have that direct experience of the imperishable, supreme reality as dwelling within the heart, and as the witness of everything, but also who we are. We have to understand that we have a sense of existing that has nothing to do with anything physical, nothing to do with the mind, nothing to do with anything except consciousness. This is the I am. We know that we exist. What is the source of that? How do we understand that? We have to see it the same way that we see this infinite absolute Brahman. So here we start with this idea of meditation. Well, I'm using this term in a very loose sense. The first kind will be really a deep type of contemplation. We know that this is the meditation of the Upanishad, Shravana, that we have to hear the highest truth when we're ready to hear it. That we have the whole idea of adhikara and everything, but the one Mahavakya that's generally used is Tattvamasi, because it's direct. The teacher will point to the disciple. You are that. I am Atma Brahman is equally good, but it doesn't have the dramatic effect. Yes, this self is Brahman, but no, you are that. And that will awaken the mind of the disciple who's ready for it. So Shravana, we have to hear that ultimate truth. This is all the path of knowledge, remember. We also have our devotion. Then Manana, and we have to very deeply try to understand the meaning of that. We have our Panchadashi class going on now, and the main method that we have there is something called Bhagatyaga, that when I think of this myself, aham, then I have to remove everything that doesn't really belong to it. I get rid of the body, mind, sense, all of those things, and what's remaining will be the same as that Brahman once I also remove all of the extraneous things there. So this is that manana, and then nididhyasana, then we have to really try to merge the mind in that idea and realize what is the real nature of the self. So this is that one type of meditation, shrotavya, mantavya, nididhyasitavya. The truth is first to be heard, then to be reflected upon, then meditated upon. And what is this truth? In this Upanishad, I am Atma Brahma, Tattvamasi. This oneness. Now, this oneness of the individual soul, supreme soul, leaves open this question of the universe. We can have that realization of the real nature of the self, and still there's always some question mark. Why and how is this world the way that it is? Such an odd world. People fighting each other and killing each other and everything. How did it happen? Was there any sense to it? We can leave that as kind of a blank. That yes, I have no idea, but I am convinced that what I consider the self, with all body, mind, senses, and everything, is a false idea. That my real sense of I is that pure consciousness. We can have that experience. So this is that first type of meditation, which is really deep reflection. Now we'll get a second type of meditation, which they call vidyas or upasanas. These are symbolic types of meditation. We wonder sometimes how the jnani, what type of meditation will the jnani have? Sometimes we're told that meditate on the vast ocean or the sky, something like that. But we'll see that there's some very interesting symbolic types of meditations that the Upanishad will recommend. Sometimes purely allegorical. There'll be some symbols, something there. And not the same as our Raja Yoga, where we're focusing on some object, or our regular type of meditation, where we have our Ishta Devata. Something different, but still it requires focusing the mind on not simply a philosophical concept, I am Atma Brahman, but something that will give us this idea of oneness. And we'll see some examples here. This, in chapter 2, section 2, begins first with the description of the supreme reality. It says, that is the bright and effulgent one, very near to us, moving about within the cave of the heart. Now, symbolic language, moving about. Huh? What is this moving about? This is something to be felt. The great goal of life. In that are fixed all beings that move and breathe and see. Know that to be the supreme adorable one. Both manifest existence and unmanifest existence, which is beyond the realm of ordinary knowing for all beings. Look at all this paradoxical type of language that we have. Both manifest and unmanifest existence, the heart of everything. So we have two ideas. One is that this ultimate reality is there within the cave of the heart, that Brahman. Second idea is that it's nothing foreign. It's not an outside thing. This is the self. I am that. This is very hard to get the tud and the twum to see them, that there's no distinction between the two. It has to be done in meditation. We can approach it through this logical reasoning and everything. This is the role of yukti. But it has to be done really through some type of meditation. Now we'll get a very nice image here, which will help us understand this whole concept of upasana, what it means in the Upanishads, with two very beautiful verses. Take hold of the bow, the great weapon that is the Upanishad. Place on the bow the arrow that has been sharpened through meditation and worship. Stretch the bow with the help of the mind that is absorbed in Brahman, and pierce the target, the imperishable Brahman. Then we get to the beautiful verse. Pranavo dhanu sharo hyatma brahmata lakshyam uchyate apramattena vedhavyam sharavat tanmayo bhavet. This pranava, om, is the bow. So everything will be symbolic here. Then the soul, Atman here, the soul is the arrow. So we try to picture this as our individual self. Right now, we have the sense of individuality, so we make use of that. Brahman is said to be the target. So we're trying to shoot ourselves into that target. One should pierce the center of the target with a fully concentrated and attentive mind. Apramatta, this mind that will not give in to error, it won't give in to any weakness of thought, that very strong, will get rid of all types of false identification. Apramattena vedhavyam, pierce. It has to be pierced, just as the arrow will go into the target, and it has to become tanmaya. It becomes one with it. Now, what we have here is a type of meditative practice where we can actually try to feel what it's like for an arrow to be shot into a target. Has anyone done archery? Huh? When you do this archery, when we were kids, we did a little bit. And if you really do good, and it'll go deep in. And it'll be hard to pull out. It'll go into this kind of straw, with bullseye and everything. And it really goes deep within so that it almost becomes merged in it. Now, if the mind can focus itself on that type of image, then the mind itself becomes merged in Brahman. This is the mind taking the form of that absolute. We have an example that we're all familiar with, is meditating on flame of a candle in a windless place. Now, this is the same concept that if the mind can fix itself on a flame that's not moving, then that means the mind is not moving. Huh? There's a trick, a little device that we can use to make the mind perfectly still. Then some higher realization takes place. This is a way of understanding tanmaya. There's just how the so seemingly individual self gets merged in that infinite absolute self. And we do it by picturing an arrow going into a target. We can actually have that as a type of meditation. So we don't have to have any deep type of thought about what does it mean for the individual soul to be one with the Supreme Soul. We simply have to merge the mind in this idea of merging and feel that oneness. Then the mind will disappear into the absolute, if we can do it. Of course, it's not a very easy thing, but all done with the help of this imagery of a bow and an arrow. Now, what happens when we have that realization? I mentioned earlier this idea that doubts are removed. There's another verse, very, very famous verse, Bhidyate Hridaya Grantis. So all of the knots of the heart will be undone. And then Chidyante Sarva Samshaya, all of the doubts will be cut. They'll be removed. Kshiyante Chasya Karmani, all of our karma will be burnt. Tasman Drishte Paravare, when we have that vision of that which is both high and low, which is both transcendent and immanent, which both dwells within the heart and within the whole universe. When we have that, then this real transformation takes place. If it's just intellectual, philosophical, that transformation won't take place. It has to be something that we relate to on a very, very personal level. I am that I know that there's no death or birth for me. I know that I can be untouched, nothing can reach me. I can be like the anvil, that nothing will move me. We have to have that type of realization. So what happens? Samskaras get all just smashed to pieces. They get all burned up. Everything gets rearranged. Of course, we have this tendencies will appear to be the same. Thakur gives so many illustrations, like the burnt string. But that power to bind us is gone. Or the sword that turns into gold, the power to hurt anybody is gone. So, and whatever seed was there that will lead to any future birth, that seed of ignorance, whatever is there, that's burnt. If we can plant a burned seed, it won't sprout. So that all of that is gone, and this crookedness of the heart. What does that mean, crookedness of the heart? We all have a little bit of desire to deceive others, a little bit of, I won't say meanness, but maybe selfishness, a little bit of wanting to place ourselves all sorts of little things. They don't have to be very bad things, but these will disappear. Why? Because everything goes back to ego, and ego is gone. Why do I care to build myself up so people will praise me, you're wonderful, this and that? It's all gone. All of the things that lead to a little bit of crookedness of the heart. Thakur used to say that few different types of people can't realize God. The one is somebody with this crooked mind. So this automatically takes place. Now, what about this idea of doubts? All of the doubts are gone. This is also an interesting subject because some doubts are with regard to questions that lose their importance. So sometimes they say that they get dissolved rather than resolved. They simply disappear. We don't care. If we think that all doubts are removed means that we know the answer to every question, that is not true. There was one school of Buddhist thought, I don't remember the name, some Gita Sankhyas or something like that, that said Buddha was all-knowing, he had to know the number of all the insects in the whole universe. He knows everything, all-knowing. How many grains of sand are there? We said, this is not what it means to be all-knowing. It means to know that gold, which is the ground of all gold jewelry. So some of these questions will not be answered after God realization. Thakur tells us very clearly. So many times he'll be asked questions and he'll say, who can understand? This is my Divine Mother is self-willed. who can understand the way of the world and the way of God and all of these things. But there won't be any importance to these things. But that doubt regarding our real nature, and doubt means that anxiety and fear and nervous, all of these things will be gone completely. This fear of death, this fear of other people, public opinion, all of that will be completely gone. So when it says that all doubts are gone, it'll be with regard to this ultimate truth, because we have that experience. Now, can doubts disappear before we have this ultimate realization? To a certain extent, and this is what we mean by conviction, vishwasa, that we can have that absolute conviction that all of this is true. But we don't have that realization yet. This is why this vishwasa, Sri Ramakrishna used to say that this is a final stage. That once we have that conviction, then just as he says, once we have the vyakulata, that longing, this conviction will be enough to sustain us. Swami Swahananda used to say this conviction is itself a type of realization. Yeah. But it's not the same as that ultimate realization when these doubts are really completely gone. And how do we know that they're gone? Because there's perfect contentment. This is that ultimate test of everything. Perfect contentment, not moved by anything. And this is what this Upanishad is trying to teach us. So this idea doubts are removed. It doesn't mean that, now I know that the non-dualists were right, or the dualists were right. That for Sri Ramakrishna, it was, no, I've gotten to the roof. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that the one path is better than any other path. And this was, I think, his ultimate teaching, philosophical type of teaching. There's a jotoma totopat. We always think of it in terms of different religious traditions. As many faiths, so many paths to God. But if we really look at how Thakur used this, then it was really, I like this idea of Hanuman, that Hanuman sometimes, what was his mata, what was his opinion, that sometimes when I feel I am the body, then I'm a dualist. I like this relationship, that you're the master and I am the servant. Sometimes I feel that I'm a jiva, then you're the whole and I'm a part. Sometimes I feel that I'm the Atman. There's no difference between us. Now, is one true, one not true? These are just from at different times, different points of view. Each one is true. And the real truth is beyond all of them. Each one is a path. This is what Sri Ramakrishna meant. Each one is a path that will lead us to that ultimate truth. We don't have to fight among all the different schools of Vedanta. Some will appeal to some, and some will, this idea of ruchi bheda and this idea of adhikara. Some will appeal to the taste of someone, and some will be more appropriate for someone else. That's all. So this is the point that we reach in the Upanishad. We'll continue, of course. I want to just stop by reading a beautiful quotation from Swamiji. Religion is realization, not talk, nor doctrine, nor theories, however beautiful they may be. It is being and becoming, not hearing or acknowledging. It is the whole soul becoming changed into what it believes. That is religion. So let's take just a few minutes. We can sit in quiet meditation.